Real stories of werewolves, of dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
I caught an illness from a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am sick in bed as I write this to you, but I swear to you that I caught this illness from a werewolf or dogman that I had to deal with a couple of days prior to coming down with this sickness, whatever it is. I am especially interested to hear back from my doctor about what specifically I have contracted, as I wonder if it is something new, or if it is a standard human kind of illness. I think that when I learn that, and find out if it is something that canines can also get, it will go a long way in letting me know if my encounter was with a dogman, or if it was in fact with some kind of a werewolf, who is also part human. I'm trying to organize my thoughts before I tell you what happened to me, but I'm starting to realize that this might sound like a cautionary tale as I tell it. I did a number of things that I can't really defend this time, and I feel kind of stupid now that I'm writing it all down and looking at it. I guess at least some of what I went through could have been avoided in a couple or three different ways now that I'm looking back on it in retrospect. So please don't do what I've done. This following story is not meant to encourage anyone to follow in my footsteps. In fact, I have learned and am still learning lessons from my poor choices. Although I still love nature, I think I've learned to respect it a lot more. The natural world is not the same as the Disneyland interpretation of it that most of us have. Nature is not a manicured park. Nature is truly wild. And if you don't respect the wild aspect of the world we live in, you can get yourself savaged by it. This is because the word wild and the word savage mean the same thing, and we humans have a tendency to forget that. Yes, nature is beautiful, but it's also hungry. Get too close to that beauty, and you will get swallowed up in it and by it. Sometimes quite literally, quite painfully too. What this story has reminded me of is that there is more than one way to get taken down by the world. You can get eaten for lunch, or you can get attacked by life forms so small that even insects can't see them. You can be felled by a predator, or you can have your story ended by a microscopically small germ. In my case, I sorta got a bit of both at the same time. So I had a pretty strange experience with a dogman or werewolf. It might be a little hard explaining this one, and I'm not over being ill yet, so that makes it harder. Basically, I was camping because my wife kicked me out. She's literally having an affair with her own divorce lawyer, who's trying to take everything from me, not just my wife. It's a bad time for me, and my self-esteem is at a low. My friends all side with her, and it's hard not feeling very down and depressed. I know that lowers my immune system and makes me more liable to catch bugs, so I am trying to get my head back together fast. However, I miss my young son, whom my wife has legally changed the name of without my permission, and is not allowing me to see. And I'm having trouble staying positive as I subsist out here in the forest in Wisconsin. I know that better times can't come out of me feeling depressed, and that I can't turn things around if I'm being a Debbie Downer. But you don't care about any of that. You just want to hear about the dogman or werewolf or whatever it was. So how did I come into contact with that creature? Here's how it happened. I woke up, and he was there, inside my tent, sleeping next to me. Yeah, it made no sense to me either, but I'll describe exactly how I remember it going down. I was having a dream about my uncle who I used to spend summers with as a child, during the years before my parents split up. While they were fighting, my life was actually better, since I was sent on a tour of all our nicest relatives. Once the divorce was finalized, though, both my parents remarried. Both of them got new kids, and I didn't belong anywhere any longer. But when I was with my uncle, I felt okay because I knew he actually cared about me. And I knew I was with my uncle when I heard him snoring. He was a heavy-set guy, and even when he was awake, it sounded like he was snoring. So I came to associate the sound with a feeling of comfort. That night in that tent, I heard a loud snoring, and instead of waking me up like it would for most people, I think it drove me down deeper into sleep somehow. But eventually I did wake up, and when I did, I groggily turned over to say good morning to my uncle. Except, he wasn't my uncle. He was a monster. I screamed and backed away, trying to get a better look at my new tent buddy. This was a dog-headed ape man. This was some kind of a bear with arms more like a man and legs more like a dog. This was not something that I would have ever invited into my tent, and I can't really understand how he crept in without waking me up the night before. Of course, I made an effort to get to the entrance exit of the tent and make good my egress, but the beast man prevented that from happening by moving between me and my goal. I was ready to cut my way out of that tent, and I pulled out my Swiss Army knife. The creature grabbed it away from me before I could even pull the blade out. I was panicking, and I was already out of options. That was when the creature sneezed on me, which was just as disgusting as any other dog sneezing on anyone else has ever been. I don't know if you've had that happen to you, but this was not the first time for me. It was the first time it was this gross, though. I felt almost like he had just marked me as his turf or something. It became apparent to me soon that this creature was not feeling well. He seemed to have a runny nose, and the same could be said for his eyes. He had a sad look about him in general, but I don't know what the average attitude for his species might be, so I have nothing to compare it to. I was being held captive by this beast man who seemed to be larger than myself and seemed to have a canine head. At least it looked more like a dog or a wolf than it looked like anything else. I wouldn't say it was your average dog head, though. It was kind of taller and more intelligent looking. So let's call it a dogman or a werewolf, because it was something along the lines of one of those things. Now, I am not the youngest man, nor am I the most agile. I don't think I could have escaped this predicament even when I was much younger. But in my age, I was completely at the mercy of this man-thing. I had no idea what to do, and I had no means to execute any ideas that I did have. This creature was larger than me, faster than me, and clearly so much stronger than any human as to make the idea of attempting hand-to-hand combat absurd. I was basically just lucky it hadn't crushed my skull already. And if my luck was to continue, it was gonna have to be because the dogman decided to allow it too. In other words, my continued existence was dependent on the dogman agreeing with the general principle of me continuing to exist. So I stopped trying to get away from the thing and I just focused on not getting it upset instead. I hoped that it would get bored of me agreeing with it and leave the tent so I could try to lock it out. Or maybe it would run off and I could pack up and go. In either case, I couldn't do anything until or unless the Beastman made his move first. And so I waited, trying not to pee my pants or vomit. I was so nervous I don't even have the words to describe it. I was a twitchy mess, blinking and scratching itches that didn't even exist. I suddenly developed every nervous tic that any human has ever had, and I felt like this was driving me insane. On top of all this, the creature itself had an awful smell of illness around him. I'm not sure what else to call it except that. His nose and eyes, as I've already explained, were runny, and he filled my tent with the smell of his cold, if you can sort of imagine what I'm trying to say. I know that it had rained the night before, and so I suppose the sick creature jumped inside my little man-made cave, since there must not have been any other shelter available. But I could hear that the rain had now stopped, and I wished this creature would move on, or else that he would allow me to escape the tent and make a run for it back to my car. I was visualizing how to get back to the parking lot in the dark, and I began wondering where my cell phone was. I could sure use the flashlight on that if I ever did succeed on making it out of this tent. And so my eyes darted around, hoping to locate the device. When the monster shifted his weight at one point, I saw that it was beneath his butt. That sank my hope, since besides not wanting to reach toward a monster's private bits, hoping to grab my property back, I wasn't sure I would even want that phone back anyway. I couldn't see if he had broken it or not, plus I figured his butt would probably be just as sick as his face and head seemed to be. I was only getting more nervous and freaked out the more I tried to calm myself down. My stomach started to make noise, and I realized it was hungry. I myself was not hungry, I felt nauseous, but I looked around for my bag of trail mix, only to notice nuts and squashed M&Ms all over the tent floor. The dogman belched loudly and I knew where my breakfast had gone. The smell of his cold hung in the air, mixed with the bad dog breath smell, and I started to gag, trying not to throw up all over the dogman in front of me. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the dogman himself fled out of my tent when he thought I was going to hurl all over him. Think how much time I could have saved if I had thought of that earlier, right? So once he was out of my tent, I sprang over to zip it up behind him, but it smelled god-awful in there, and I really wanted to go outside along with the dogman. I remember hesitating, but the vomit breath smell inside there was just too much to take, and so I gave up and opened the tent up. Then I stuck my head outside, breathing out bad air and choking on it before beginning to heave in new fresh pre-dawn air. My lungs ached, but the air tasted so good that all I could do was focus on breathing and choking until I began to feel a bit better. Once I did, still panting and gasping for air, I looked up and I saw the dogman. He had withdrawn a bit from the tent and stood mostly on his hind legs, but with one forearm down on the ground in front, apparently for balance. His eyes were wide and held an expression of horror on his face. It took me a few seconds to realize that he was still grossed out, that I had almost thrown up on him. Partially because I was lightheaded, and partially because I was just fed up, I quickly moved to get out of the tent and then staggered forward, making retching noises, as though I were about to puke all over this dogman. Just as expected, he let out a high-pitched doggy whine and beat it off into the woods before I could get too close to him. I can truly say that my dogman experience ended when we each got sick of the other one. Literally. Well, except for the fact that I felt really achy while I packed up my tent and belongings, achier when I hiked back to my car, and achiest as I called and made an appointment to see a doctor who is friends with my family. Let's call him Dr. X so he can maintain his anonymity. I am sick with something, but is it something that a dog can give you? Or a bear? Is it something you can catch from an animal is what I'm trying to ask. Because I have a runny nose and runny eyes, and I feel like he looked when I was stuck in that tent with him, do you follow? So I wonder if this is a known disease or something new. Is this something from another dimension or reality? Because I saw a show on TV and they were saying that the werewolves jump through portals. If they came from the other side of one of these dimensions, then they must be bringing new kinds of illnesses here with them, same as the Europeans brought smallpox to the Americas. On the other hand, what if it turns out to be that I just have the flu? Or some other already known kind of bug? What will that tell us about the creature I was cooped up with? Will it mean that animals in his dimension have human illnesses? Or might it mean that he was in fact a human being who only appeared to me to be something other? I think I'm asking if I had a werewolf in my tent and not a dogman. Here's why I think that's not that crazy an idea. This creature or entity went to sleep in a tent where a human was already sleeping without waking him up. That doesn't sound like something a wild animal would do to me. He also ate my trail mix before going to sleep next to me and snoring loudly. His behavior seems more human to me than anything else. Or I guess I mean it feels like the behavior of a creature that had a dim memory of having once been human, like a werewolf might have. Whatever, it's just a theory. I never felt like I was trapped with a wild animal. I felt more like I was being not allowed to leave by an intelligent creature. But feelings are feelings, they aren't facts, and so that's just my gut reaction to all of this. I want to wait to hear what Dr. X's blood test and nose scraping tell him before I send his email off to you. Addendum. I have just heard back from my doctor's office and they say I have a kind of illness that I don't know if you're supposed to talk about on YouTube. It's a certain kind of a bug that got famous a couple years back. Basically, I've got a cold and the flu and a fever. I looked it up and this specific kind of a flu is not something that a dog can pass on, although supposedly they can catch it from humans. So if that creature really was as sick as he looked, and if he really was sick in the same way that I am now, then he had to have either been human or some third kind of being. I could not have caught what I have from a dog. I could only catch it from a human, or whatever that creature was that I had to deal with on that awful night that I will never forget. So I think I may possibly have narrowed down what a werewolf is, or at least what that particular dogman or werewolf was. It is close enough to being human that I can state with some certainty that I caught an illness from a werewolf.
If you want a coloring book full of monstrous delight, then give this a look. It'll give you more fright, right? Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, hey, it's a coloring book, hooray, okay. Link is in the description.
If you like this show, raise your hand and say yes. Then please thank our EP, Inolin Reyes. Please join me in thanking Inolin Reyes, our newest $10 channel member here at Scary Stories. This means they get all our perks, including our over 25 hours of secret uncensored episodes. We're long overdue for making a new volume of those. I better get my butt in gear about that soon. If you would like to find out how to get all the same perks that Inolin Reyes gets, then listen to what our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman has to say. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.